Hey guys, how you doing? It's been an awesome day. I actually heard a lot about artificial intelligence in some of the previous panels here, and all the things that I heard are exciting because they sort of align with what I'm going to talk about. So great, we see eye to eye on this. Anybody here was at Access last year and saw some of the talks I did around like quantifying Web3 security? Anybody here? Or anybody see online? Yep, a couple of people, awesome. So if you watch that and you remember, I like to typically give my keynotes or talks on thinking about frameworks and giving you guys something to think about that you could take home or take back to your jobs and maybe conceptualize it and be very pragmatic with how you can approach this technology. And after submitting this topic for this keynote, I kind of think we should call it the role of blockchain in artificial intelligence, with the way it came out, but one and the same. And it's really because when I was putting this keynote together on the topics, I found that I take away from it, I think that blockchain can actually help AI a lot more than the other way around. And you guys can have a subjective opinion on that after I go through it all. But I'm putting together sort of a framework for this that we can discuss it. Be videos to watch later on. How do we use artificial intelligence with blockchain together? They're both emerging technologies that have extreme amount of use cases that help financial and also like other types of industries. So we're going to go through a quick taxonomy that I see of blockchain with AI, and then focus on some ecosystems and compare the two to find overlaps. Because what we're seeking to do is look for synergies and what should we focus on. Because that's the way that I like to approach things as CTO at Walbroehl, starting with something and not wasting resources, or we like to try new things and take risks, but there's educated risks, and there's also really figuring out what is the outcome, with keeping the end in mind, so to speak. So the outcome from this will be some of the most impactful synergies that of the marriage of blockchain and AI together, and then some other potential ones too that maybe a little bit more outliers. But I'm hoping that you guys can see this, and maybe if you're thinking about what are some of the benefits we can have from artificial intelligence, because there are so many, that you can refocus maybe some projects that you have at your own institutions. So going through the taxonomy here, kind of starting with the areas of major focus within each of the two, and of course consensus being one of them. The consensus having this isn't all-encompassing, but examples of that: the proof of work, proof of stake, proof of authority, proof of history, proof of X, and so on. And within that delegated proof of stake and leased, there's many different types of even detailed ones around those. Types of blockchain: so public, permissioned, consortium, as a service, hybrid blockchains. The infrastructure around blockchain, with layer ones and layer zeros as well, side chains, parallel chains, and all of that lives on core infrastructure that kind of shares it with AI as well. And then you have protocols. Protocols, there are many protocols out here, but I think the two biggest ones that we're seeing, the most prolific, is ones that are kind of driven by smart contracts, like the DeFi ones and the NFTs, DAOs, and then on the privacy side, ZK and rollups and snarks. And then on the AI taxonomy, linking to that doesn't provide the quite overlap of where we can focus on synergies is in AI operations. Some of the big ones being in the storage and processing components, the data management, and the training of models, whether it's through custom training data or public data. And then the model deployment and how we see lots of customized models that are pre-trained, and then we can utilize them. And then finally, AI applications. And this is where you can merge together some of those use cases in the taxonomy between smart contract use cases and protocols, and then AI applications. And we'll be studying some of the overlaps on that, but things like optimization, AI applications that provide deep learning, business intelligence, efficiency gains, generative media or generative art, which kind of goes into the deep fake area in a way, and then agents and assistants. They all have kind of this focus area on it. So that's a taxonomy to think at a high level. Now let's dig into some of the meat. And the approach that I took on this was to compare ecosystems, because there's different demographics that use it in different ways and have different needs around artificial intelligence, what it provides value for. So these ecosystems, I was inspired by, I believe it was maybe Coinbase actually put out some paper around this. I thought it was very awesome, citing them. But we have data providers and data owners. We have the developers on both sides of it. We have the providers of compute, or the providers of core infrastructure. You have models or smart contracts. And then finally, users, the end users for all of this. And each of them have different responsibilities. Each of them have different needs. And what is success and what is useful for them, there's different requirements between all of them. And the requirements to merge the two together require some type of trust barrier too. And I think that's where a lot of the key differentiations, this being a cybersecurity event, trust is part of that. And there's a lot of mistrust on both sides. So when you put the two together, how do you combine the two to not to build more gaps and more barriers and silos, but to harmony together to close those gaps? And that's what we want to look at. What are the useful harmonies between the two to close gaps and burn down bridges and combine them together? So the first one, let's look at the data providers and the ecosystem. So first thing I did was I asked ChatGPT, so what data are you trained on? Who's your data provider? Just let's ask the source. And they say I was trained on licensed data created by OpenAI, publicly available data, the internet. I think it consumed all the internet trained there, included websites, books, periodicals, other freely available things that anybody could see. And of course, artificial intelligence is very quick. Definitely trained on legal terms, because it's very quick to defend itself always. However, I don't have access to proprietary. I'm not going to use it. So, the lawyers help to train it a bit. Now, it's trained on a lot of the public domain. And that's very obvious because it knows pretty much everything. And I use it more than I do like a Google search now. Blockchain, so the data providers for blockchain, that's provided usually by the people transacting with the blockchain. For Ethereum smart contracts, users are giving it call data or ETH commands or transaction commands to, hey, send coins from there to there, or update this NFT ownership. So a lot of that data is done from the users, and consensus is keeping a state in a certain way from the user's change of state. Okay, so now let's talk about data owners. So data owners, data providers are two different things. Ask AI again. So who owns the data that you're trained on? And what it says, if it's being honest, I believe it is, publicly data is, it's publicly available on the internet. The ownership usually resides with, the IP of the people that put that on the internet themselves. The licensed data, which may be proprietary ones provided to them, is that, OpenAI, they acquired the license for that, whatever they used for the tuning and training. And then there's data specifically created by OpenAI in this case, or the other ones if it's Anthropic and whoever is the custodian of the technology. Blockchain data owners. Now you can look at this two ways. Data owner of blockchain is the private key owner. If you're talking about the assets on there, in truth, if you own the key, not your keys, not your coin, the typical saying. So the ownership is self-custody, is with you if you have the key. But then the blockchain infrastructure itself it's owned by, it's democratized. It's owned by the people. I always like the phrase of, fiat is the money of businesses, and gold is the money of God, and Bitcoin is the money of the people. So it's kind of, blockchain is the people, the owner for that. And that's why it's open source, and we have a lot of contribution to it from the open source. Satoshi owns it, right? So now let's look at the developers. The developers, the way that developers kind of contribute to the ecosystem of artificial intelligence, they have a software development lifecycle much the same as any technology. They are usually from either private organizations, they are from academics that doing their PhD studies, open source communities that are giving it with all of their hard work to the world to make it a better place. And they have their life cycle of defining a problem or task, going in, they gather the data, they have a hypothesis, then they go to train, validate the training works by tuning it, constantly retraining, optimizing it, finally then deploying it as a model that we can consume. And you can see the rapid increase in the deployments with the different models that are coming out all the time. They just get more and more sophisticated. Blockchain is not too much there because it works the same way, just focused on blockchain ecosystem. Private organizations, academia, and they have a SDLC process for testing the security of the contracts because of one of a key differentiation around immutability. So that's something to think about when you look at the differences there. Okay, that's one glaring difference between the two that we need to think about filling a gap for. Compute providers. I think this one is one of the most similar of ecosystems. The compute providers, in artificial intelligence, you have the hyperscalers, the AWS, Microsoft, GCPs, the hardware innovators like NVIDIA that is providing all of this superpower to do this compute. And then specialized chip makers like Grok and the other ones that are coming. And there are some decentralized compute networks too that we see out there, like Golem, Render, and many others. So they are providing the compute power. Now, looking at blockchain compute power, depends on the consensus, but usually compute power is also democratized, and you have blockchain ecosystems that are done by miners and stakers, validators. They are providing their hash power, essentially, to provide that compute power. But then you have the platform as a service, like the block daemons and the alchemies and Furas that are also providing infrastructure for that, because it can be expensive, time-consuming, and highly technical to run a validator or staking. So staking as a service. Model contract owners. So this is really who creates the model. Anybody can create their own model. You can have your own private one trained on your own data. We do that at Walbroehl for many process purpose things too, to gain efficiencies from that. So those model owners can be proprietary data. This could be the ownership of those, unless you willingly open source that. Models I kind of compare to smart contracts. Who is the owner of the smart contracts? And that is varied depending on the particular protocol there. You have DAOs, you have no ownership, just fully autonomous, Turing-complete smart contracts, all the way to ones that are owned by a single admin with a single key. That's Anon. So you have all across the board. There's not really a straight answer for smart contracts. And then finally, the users. This is where things are probably the most disparate between the two. The user needs for it and their different areas of concern or category. So looking at the purpose, what is the core purpose for blockchain for users typically is they want to have democratization. I heard that word a lot today. The transaction speed, settlement speed. They want to have governance, NFTs, things, the new generation coming in wanting things faster and more transparent. AI purpose, usually around productivity, getting insights, getting more automation or things happening in a way for decision making without having to pay humans to do some of the monotonous things that take a long time, getting insights. Accessibility is the next thing. With blockchain, accessibility requires a lot of knowledge. Like it's to some people, it may seem very easy to just sign a transaction with MetaMask, but there's a lot that goes into it that I don't trust my grandmother to send in a transaction. There's a barrier to entry to it, and I think user adoption has been a big struggle. But my grandma seems to know how to use ChatGPT really easy. It's, it's user-friendly and low barrier entry. So we see some, something to focus on there for sure. Cost models can be the same. There's platforms that enable like the subscription for both. But when you look at the core blockchain, the transaction fees are around paying for gas fees or paying if you're a validator, the staking fees. Now the risks, I think this is something that is a real focus, is the risks in the two. This is where they can help each other, as we'll see in coming slides. Key loss, volatility, different scams and rug pulls, Ponzi schemes, all of this, if you've ever been on like the Discord or Telegram channels of, meme coin land, it's freaking crazy. So, yeah, well, the risks are very different from some of the things that we are concerned about with artificial intelligence, like the privacy of the data that we're putting into it. Where does it go when you put all of this into a model, and bias and censorship. Is it trained a certain way to not give you correct output? Over reliance, I think, is something that's really big. I heard somebody say earlier, artificial intelligence is going to make us lazy, as people, and I can see that. For sure. I mean, you still have to guide it, but it certainly does. If I use it all the time, my scripting skills will definitely start to get rusty. I'll say that. The community, one is decentralized, user-driven. Another one is more centralized, provider-driven, except for some of those open source ones that I don't know how much they're used. The core philosophy on the two, one is about transparency and decentralization, and the other one is around data intelligence and automation and helping gain a lot more efficiencies from that. The persona, the individuals, organizations, very much the same, very much the same there. And then finally, the way you interact with it. One is through private keys, the other one is through platform API tools. But there are, of course, another layer behind those keys of API tools, so not too much differences there. All right, so that's a lot of different things to compare to, and I think just talking through them, you could see that there's some key areas where, they can help each other. There's some synergies on several things. So that's where we come to those areas, again, walking through it. Now that we've compared those ecosystems, how can the role of blockchain help AI in the most significant ways? So with the user side, seeing and talking through that, the authenticity and verification of the models and the data, it can really look at it, with the data it's trained on, a lot of concerns around the manipulation of like opinion or the bias inside of the data, maybe the deep fakes of, is this a real thing I'm looking at, or is this like a deep fake? Don't believe what you see anymore on TV. I've been using a lot of these picture to video platforms, and it's crazy. Like, I'm using it for entertainment purposes, but in back of my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see if we could do advanced phishing campaigns with this stuff pretty soon, because it's nuts. I actually had a voice model of myself, and I had to call my wife on the phone, and she was having conversations with me for like 2 minutes. So how can you tell the difference between real and fake? I mean, that's, I think, the biggest concern that users will have as far as security. So that's something that definitely blockchain can help with, is the proof of realism, of valid identity, everything around the tokenization of a human in a way. I know there's been a couple projects that have come out, like the WorldCoin one here, ZK. I really think that authenticity of liveliness is something that could really be something here. The data providers is the other big win. There's something called federated learning. Federated learning is where, very much like blockchain, where you don't rely on just one single source of truth. You federate that. Oracles is a good example of that. If you trust one oracle for your price feed or your API feed, you're going to have a bad time, probably. So the same thing here. Federated learning between models, let's look at different trains and have them come to consensus together, collaboratively, have them maybe train each other and see how they can work together to remain objective and trustworthy. So blockchain can really, setting it up like a blockchain to increase that transparency and the accountability for it, and then showing and recording on chain where the data is from so that we can see that there's no majority type of attack that goes on with this. For the data owners, I think that transparency and accountability is a characteristic that we see in decentralized systems. So data that is on-chain, its origin, where it's coming from, the genesis of that, any subsequent modification to these models or these API instances that you're connecting to with artificial intelligence can really do that. And also being a provider of that online content, you can foster more accountability for that to make sure that you're not providing that, that manipulation of data, here. So, having accountability on that and then training with that will help a lot with that transparency, and the data owners that are providing this to really be consumed by all of the communities, is giving there. So this is a key differentiator. The developers one seems pretty straightforward. This is something we're using right now all the time. The productivity and efficiency gains from that is, these developer platforms like Cursor it's just phenomenal what you can do with the things that it provides you with the co-pilots. It can, it'll never replace a human, but it can definitely make them very, very strong, like augment them and be able to do things within hours that would normally take them weeks. So coding much faster, we're going to see a lot more output from I think everybody across all companies, and that's going to make us now, we have to compete against that. Other people are going to be using it. You have to adopt it to keep up, or you're going to be left in the dust. The compute providers, really interesting one here, public compute marketplace for API. Why don't we incentivize, just like blockchain infrastructure does, to provide this? It's actually going to be helpful just from hardware support. There's so much data center and electricity being poured into this. I don't actually think that it can't keep up with some demand at this point. There's going to be a threshold, but what if all this extra compute power out there? What if we, as users in the ecosystem, can help provide that and relieve some of the strain from this data center energy consumption, providing more energy independence on that for the growing demand, and then being incentivized for it is very blockchain. I think that's an opportunity that we can probably do, and people would love to have that. If I can get paid to help train models, that'd be awesome. And then finally, analytics. I heard a lot about using AI on blockchain data to provide analytics around security, maybe some financial protocols to do better trading, better management, or just find fraudulent or risky behavior within the blockchain. So that's something that with DLT you can establish that and have these inputs be sent to the model. If you guys were looking at our the Serif demo I gave earlier today, one of the policy engine decisions you could possibly do is have an AI model look at the policy and make a fraudulent decision, yes or no, on chain, and then say, stop, we need to have a second set of eyes, or the risk team look at this. That could be very good harmony and marriage between blockchain, that is to make those decisions quicker, more accurately based on data that it sees on chain. Also, just the ownership of that, the digital rights management, the intellectual property. We just talked about who are the data owners and who's accountable for it. Even just crediting that, in royalty payments for music or for any creative output for that. We can have. I would love to have. As a musician myself, if I could have AI replace ASCAP and BMI, the people that are supposed to be writing my royalty checks, I think it would be more accurate, to be honest. So those are, I think, key benefits, subjectively, just from some studying around the two purposes of that. Some other, not outliers, but areas of potential and benefits would be, around that data model integrity, timestamp hashes for the data sets. Combating deepfake with that on chain is a bit different than some of the external tools for it. So this is the reverse of blockchain helping AI, but AI helping blockchain on this side. Could be an opportunity there, but I think we have to solve the first one prior to that. How about AI-based consensus protocols? That's pretty meta. Right now, consensus is about independent nodes that really agree upon state of a ledger. So what if you had independent AI or LLMs that can really be coordinated and provide a proof to find out what is the most accurate result of a prompt or some type of search strategy or result on there. That'll actually help with some of the bias that we may see or some of the mistuning of the models. Payment for use, model training. This one's kind of the edge case around incentivizing the data providers, not the compute providers, but the actual data providers. Things like on the blockchain world of like the Gitcoin, open source projects that you commit code to, incentivizing the ones that get people that are using that open source code in some way. Same model, but with artificial intelligence contributors, and rewarding them for that. And then finally, deployment of them on-chain for the analytics. I think this one actually may even move to some of the primary purposes there, especially for financial, because you have on-chain data. Depending on which blockchain ecosystem we're looking at, there's the realistic and pragmatic approach on that. Like, it can be done very easily for EVM. Things that are much faster, like Solana or Rust-based systems, may not be as practical. It'd be an enormous amount of compute power to make analytical decisions in real time, unless you're just doing post-analytics, and kind of shutting down the stock market and then evaluating, running all of your models for risk and hedging and sort. You can definitely do that. And then a bonus one at the end here, some financial services use cases there, just for your customers, enabling trust and removing some of the friction around the pain that they may have with credit checks or doing some transaction speed, sending wire transfers. Can take a long time, and I'm telling you, the younger generation is not going to like that. They want everything right now done automatically. You can use settlement along with risk decision between the two, and I think it's a great benefit. So with that, I wanted to thank you guys. Hope it was helpful. You guys got some insights on there. Steve, thanks for listening.